It's Christmas, and what better gift can we receive than the release of the very anticipated Wonder Woman 1984? So let's get into it. Welcome to Silver Screen Talk. My name is Luke Lapointe. I started this channel because movies are a big part of my life and I want to talk about them with people who care about them as much as I do. With that, remember to hit that like and subscribe button. And most importantly, as we're talking about a big movie, I want to hear you down in that comment section. Have you seen Wonder Woman 1984? Are you going to see it soon? What have you thought about the movie? What do you hope to see from the movie? I want to hear all the comments flowing because it's a big movie. This is a very anticipated movie. It's a movie we all have marked down on our calendars, especially because it's being released on HBO Max. It's the new beta, basically, for that release program. So let's get into it. Now, this was a movie that I was very excited about, and I think it was a very good follow-up to Wonder Woman. It's much different than the original movie, and one of the things that sometimes sequels tend to do when the original movie is very successful, both critically and financially, they tend to be more of a rehash of the original. This is not. Part of that which helps is the setting, much different setting from World War I, which war tends to be more bleak and dreary. Now this movie's set in 1984, the 80s tend to be more of a flamboyant, electric, just kind of weird decade, and it definitely feeds into that. It definitely leads into the campiness a little more, which I enjoy. That's kind of what a comic book is. It's campy, and so they leaned into that more, and I think they used the personality of the 80s very effectively. You have a much bigger, more interesting plot than the first movie, in my opinion, and at times it works really well. Other times, not so much. We'll get into that in a bit. You have great performances from your core four in this movie: Gal Gadot, Chris Pine, Kristen Wiig, and Pedro Pascal. And I think this is Gal's best performance of her career. I think she takes a step every new movie she comes out with, and she's just able to portray emotion so much better, and she sells things so much better, especially kind of sadness, more emotions like that. I feel like in movies in the past, she tended to be more kind of, brick wall, a little more emotionless. She has more emotion in this movie, and I think this is probably the best performance of her career. I want to be honest, I heard a lot of people who were doubting Kristen Wiig as Barbara Minerva, later going to be Cheetah, and I think she absolutely killed her performance. I think she can be a serious actor. She can be a badass, and I think she does it all in this movie. I think she does it all really, really well, playing opposite of Gal Gadot, being the antagonist to Gal Gadot's protagonist as Diana. It is great to see Chris Pine back as Steve because he had such great chemistry with Gal Gadot in the first movie. And Pedro Pascal is always great. I love Pedro Pascal, Mandalorian, and I always first remember him as Oberyn Martell. I think he always kills every performance he's in, and I think he absolutely kills it as Max Lord. And I like what they did with Steve Trevor in this movie, using him as the fish out of water this time, while Diana was the fish out of the water in the first movie, coming from, her world into European World War I. I think that's a great job reversing that, having Gal Gadot show Chris Pine the ropes in the 1980s. I also like the way they used him in the plot, kind of a foil to Diana and someone who couldn't stick around. I think they did that really well. I think it was smarter to not have them stick around the whole movie. And what was happening on screen made you feel every emotion. Every scene made you feel something. And that's because of two parts. Part one is because of Patty Jenkins. She is a great director, and the way she directs a movie makes you feel stuff really well. And the other part of that is Hans Zimmer. His score is magnificent. Every one of his scores is always magnificent, and this might be one of his top 5 in my opinion. It makes you feel every emotion. It puts you in your feels in some scenes. He just absolutely kills it like he always does, and that elevated the movie. It elevated each scene so well. Scenes that might not have been as good, you still didn't get bored watching it because of the score or because of the way it was directed. I do think they had a nice nod to the invisible jet in this movie. That's a staple of the Wonder Woman comics and TV shows of old, and just to see that put a smile on my face. And honestly, I think this movie is sending an interesting message about having your greatest wishes and desires fulfilled, and whether or not that's the best thing for you. I think it's an interesting thing to think about. Just leaves you in thought at the end of this movie. However, there were some things that were not as good in this movie as much as I liked it. What I was saying before about the plot, it was good at times and at other times not so much. And while it was interesting, it was all over the place. It was going 10 different directions in one scene. Part of it being all over the place is what I attribute to a lack of logic. It's a lack of, things just not making sense and you having to go along with it. It doesn't work for me. I think there were scenes where I was like, yeah, this just doesn't make sense and I don't know how this moves the plot forward. I think this is just, part of the concept that they thought would go well, but it doesn't go as well as they thought. And while Chris Pine is great, and it is always great to see Steve Trevor, I don't particularly like them bringing him back into this movie. I think he had a really good send-off in Wonder Woman, and I felt he felt a little forced into the plot. While he was used well in the time he was used, it didn't need to happen, partly because of Diana's mindset of Steve after he died in Wonder Woman, the way she talked about him in Justice League, and it kind of messes with the timeline too. The way they talked about Steve in Justice League. I know we don't like to talk about Justice League, but there was an established timeline in that, and I feel like that kind of messes with it. And while I was tracking with Max Lord's motivation in the beginning, I feel like it took like a sharp left turn and went into some weird territory, some over-the-top territory where it didn't make sense for his motivation to be that when it was just about his success. And it didn't make sense for the way that they set up the character for his motivations to be what they became later in the movie. And another thing is, I think the movie was too long. It was about 2.5 hours. It did not need to be 2.5 hours, especially for a sequel. I think they could have cut 15, 20 minutes from this movie, especially from like the first hour and a half. That was a lot of exposition that some of it we didn't really need. While it was some character building, there were scenes where I definitely could have gone without. If I cut some of those 15, 20 minutes out of the movie, I think that would have made it a lot more sharp and less all over the place. And lastly, people are going to call this a bad movie, but it's not. There were really high expectations for this movie. I don't think those ever could have been met. I had high expectations for this movie. This was one of my most anticipated movies of the year. I just don't think they could have ever been met. So people are going to say, it's not as good as they thought, so therefore it's going to be a bad movie. It's not a bad movie by any stretch of the imagination. It's a good movie that didn't execute on everything it needed to execute. It's a good enough follow-up for me. And I still think it's one of the better films in the DCEU. Now, before I get into my score, I want to let you know if you like my reviews and you want to see more of them, make sure to click up above to be taken to that playlist. And I'm going to be dropping another DCEU ranking on you guys tomorrow because it's DCEU time, baby. Now, getting into my score. Like I said, it was a good movie, but it just failed to execute on some major things. I did like a lot of it, but there were some things that were just not as good. Therefore, for my brain score, thinking as a critic, I'm going to be giving it a 77%. Like I said, good movie, didn't execute on everything. It was good enough for me, though. Heart score, I really did enjoy this movie. There were times where I was a little bored, but I still really enjoyed it. I love Gal Gadot. I love all the cast. I think they did a great job. I'm giving it an 85% on the heart score. 77 on the brain score, 85% on the heart score, and that's a review. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button if you want to see more of my content, especially more about superhero franchises, and leave your thoughts down in the comment section. This was a big movie for all of us. I want to hear what you had to say about it. Thank you so much, and keep on loving movies as much as I do.